Howdy and welcome to Bamberger Ranch. My name is Aldo Leopold. I'm the director of the Texas A&M Natural Resources Institute, and we're going to continue our Leopold Live series here at Bamberger, continuing to talk about the 5 basic tools introduced by Aldo Leopold, the father of wildlife management. These 5 tools include cow, axe, plow, fire, and gun. And what we hope to do in the upcoming months is show you how those tools can be applied, but with very specific projects and objectives. And so with me is Dr. April Sampson. She's the executive director of Bamberger, and she's going to tell us a little bit about Bamberger and what we hope to cover in the series.
Great. Thank you so much, Roel. We're really excited to have you and your colleagues from the Natural Resources Institute back here at Selah Bamberger Ranch Preserve. And we're excited about continuing our journey into Leopold Live version 2. Like Roel said, we'll be providing more detail and more useful information regarding the 5 tools that Aldo Leopold championed. Here at Selah Bamberger Ranch Preserve, we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and our mission is landowner stewardship, outreach, and environmental education. So we have many Central Texas school children that come visit us every year for hands-on science-based environmental education lessons, and we also lead showcase tours and workshops for landowners interested in practicing restoration and good land stewardship. So we're very happy to be partnering with Natural Resources Institute, and we know that you'll benefit a lot from the information that we are going to be talking about during this new version of Leopold Live.
So let's go ahead and get started.
Great.
Thank you guys. So as these guys mentioned, today we're going to be talking about nest boxes, which is standing right here behind me. You may also hear these referred to as Bluebird boxes, and that's simply because these boxes were used to help with bluebirds. Unfortunately, bluebirds have a long history in the U.S. of decline, and that's due to a couple different factors, namely the use of pesticides hit these guys really hard, as well as invasive species, so thinking about house sparrows and European starlings using these nest boxes that they would be using, and then of course also habitat loss, and then climate change hit our bluebirds really difficult. But we actually have 3 species of bluebirds in the U.S., and luckily all 3 can be found in Texas. So we've got our mountain bluebird, our eastern bluebird, and our western bluebird. Now really the one that's going to be using these nest boxes here in Texas for breeding is our eastern bluebird. It looks really similar to that western bluebird, but just check out the throat there and you'll notice that he's got a nice red throat. So if you see what you have determined to be a bluebird nest in Texas, it is most likely our eastern bluebird. Now, the reason that they're using these nest boxes is because they are cavity nesters. But to be more specific, they're technically secondary cavity nesters, which simply means that they are not primary producers of those cavities. So think about something like a woodpecker that can excavate its own cavity. These birds, like the bluebird, need these man-made cavities or cavities that have already been excavated by a primary cavity producer. And so that's why these boxes are so important to these species that rely on them. Now there are other birds along with the bluebirds that are going to be using these same nest boxes. So here in Central Texas we have a few different ones, but the most common are going to be your Carolina chickadee, your Buick's wren, and then your tufted or black-crested titmouse. And with that last species, here in Central Texas, we're going to see a few more black-crested titmice, and then if you're a little further east, you'll shift into the tufted titmouse range. So a few of the different birds that are going to be using these nest boxes, and we can learn a little bit about the habitat preferences that these guys have by looking at their nests. And so if we start with our bluebirds, you'll notice that bluebirds are predominantly, almost exclusively making their nests out of grass. So pretty indicative of the habitat type that that bird needs. They like nice, large, open fields or grasslands because that's where they're going to get their food source, but also because that's going to be their nesting material. And we can see these same kinds of clues with our other nests there. So looking at the Bewick's wren nest, we will notice a lot of twigs, almost exclusively a very twiggy nest. And that's because this is a bird that likes a very dense forested type of area. And then our other two, the Carolina chickadee and the tufted titmouse or black-crested titmouse, those nests are really similar, and I have a pretty hard time actually telling them apart. But they're very mossy nests, and so these are birds that are going to like a nice kind of a mixed shrubland or maybe an edge habitat. So you could find all of these nests in similar areas, but those are the general types of habitats that are going to attract these birds. And how cool is this that we've got an Ashthroated Flycatcher right here singing his beautiful song. He's actually another one of our secondary cavity nesters. We don't have one of his photos up here, but he's got a nest that is heavy with the fur, so really distinctive. If you open up your nest box and you see a pretty shallow nest about 2 inches high and just almost exclusively fur, then you know you're looking at an Ashthroated Flycatcher. A lot of the other birds that I've mentioned are a bit more common, but this guy's definitely a common, not as common, but you can find him using one of your nest boxes in the hill country. And there he is singing that distinctive song for us. You can know that you've got an Ashthroated if you hear that little bit of a ka-too followed by a ka-brick. Ka-too. So each of those birds are going to have their own types of habitat requirements, which is why here on the ranch we've placed these nest boxes in a variety of different habitats. So we've got a few nest boxes in nice open grasslands for our bluebirds, and then we've got a good mix of them found in dense vegetation, kind of up on our edge habitat near some denser trees. Now here on the ranch we've had nest boxes for over 20 years. So this has been a conservation effort that's been one of our longest standing conservation programs. Now, in terms of construction of your nest box, there's a lot of different ways that you can go with it. I've seen really small ones, I've seen fairly large ones, so don't focus too much on getting the dimensions correct. There are tons of resources out for you on the internet to find different construction of nest boxes. I will mention one feature that is very important is the diameter of that entrance hole, simply because you really want to focus on attracting the right sort of species to your nest box, and keeping those invasive species out, like the house sparrow or the European starling that I mentioned. If you're keeping your entrance at about 1.5 inches in diameter, by doing that, you're not going to allow those other birds, those undesirable birds, to get into your nest box. And smaller birds that are the targeted species, like that Carolina chickadee, your eastern bluebirds, they're not going to have any trouble getting in there. So that's what don't worry too much about your construction, except for in terms of the diameter of that entrance hole. That's the one takeaway where you do need to, really measure and make sure everything's just right. And there are a few other features that you can add to your nest box if you want to get fancy with it. So some people really, especially here in Texas, like to include a heat shield, so that they're making sure that they've got a nest box that's well ventilated, shielding away that heat, and really good for the birds and not overheating. And you can also add in predator baffles. Now these do not have to be complicated. You can simply construct a little bit of PVC around the pole that your nest box is on, and that's going to help keep out things like raccoons and of course Texas rat snakes. In terms of construction, go ahead and check out any of the links listed below. There's so many great resources out there if you've never made a nest box before and you're looking to get started on just how to construct the perfect nest box. So talking about where you want to place your nest boxes, as I mentioned, wherever you choose to put it, you'll attract different birds. So talking about this nest box that I have right here, it's kind of in a little bit of an edge habitat. I've got it on a little bit of relief, and to me this looks like it would be a great place for maybe a Bewick's wren, maybe an Ashthroated Flycatcher. And I'll just show you a really easy to check. So that door just slides right open. There's no nest right in there right now, but that's what that looks like. All right, so talking about whenever you've got your nest box in place and you want to start checking in on it, I would recommend doing this maybe say once a week. There's no need to check on it every single day to see how your birds are doing because you don't want to disturb them too much. So in terms of monitoring your progress, I would say every 5 days at most is going to be perfectly fine, or if you just want to check on them every week, every other week, that's totally up to you as a landowner and what you're monitoring. So talking a little bit about the maintenance of your nest box, let's say you're checking on it and you notice that there's nothing in there. You might sometimes notice that paper wasps have started to build their nests. So what I do is I just always take a pencil with me when I'm checking, and I'll just knock those nests out simply because they can find another home easily, whereas our birds, are very specific and they want their nest box. So just a simple maintenance tip, knock those little paper wasp nests out, no problem. So yeah, just be sure to always have that pencil with you whenever you're checking for your record keeping, and super easy way to just get rid of those paper wasp nests. So now let's talk about, it's the end of the season. Hopefully you've had a bird using your nest box, and now what should you do? So I would say at the end of summer here in Texas, I would say you're safe by about late July or sometime in August. If you want to be really safe, you'll want to go ahead and just take that nest out because you could have mites in there. You're going to attract different bugs. And so just go ahead and clean that out so that whenever it's time for the next spring breeding season, birds are ready. They're coming into an empty nest box that they know, oh, I can use this. This box is ready for me. So just really quick, I'll mention that this is a very brief overview of our nest boxes and how important they are, but it's also one of the easiest way to quickly check off 2 of your wildlife valuation. So you're providing shelter here and census, so really easy. And whenever you're reporting for this, all you need to do is talk about the number of nest boxes and your target species. So a really easy way to get your foot into the wildlife valuation program. Now, I've, as I mentioned, a really brief overview, so be sure to check out some of the resources below online if you'd like to learn a little bit more about how to get started with your nest boxes. All right, and with that, we'll now go to answering any questions that we have.
All right, first question we have here, how can we avoid predators in our nest boxes?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked. So as I mentioned, you can throw a predator baffle on here and that's going to be helpful. But one of the best things that you can actually do is when you're checking your nest box, take a different path. We found that predators can follow the scent trails to the nest box. So if you walk the same path to and from your nest box every time, though that might not seem like a big deal to you, predators may notice that scent trail. So whenever I have in the past had nest boxes that I was checking regularly, I just made sure to change up the path. Sometimes I came from the north, sometimes I came from the south. So just adding a little bit of variation whenever you're checking on your nest box.
Very cool. So how often do we need to check our nest boxes, and what do we do if we find a bird on the nest?
Really good question. So in terms of how often you want to check your nest box, it's up to you, but I would say at most you don't need to be checking on them every day. That's a little bit too much. A good frame of reference, I would say, is about every 5 days. Feel free to take a quick peek. You can also take a quick photo with your phone so that you don't have to stand there and look at them for too long. So I'd say every 5 days, but also if you're just checking on them every 2 weeks, you can kind of be as involved or uninvolved as you want to, because once you get the nest box up, you've already done your part of the job there.
So when placing a nest box, is there a certain direction that we should be placing it?
Yeah, we actually do have a directional preference, which is really just facing more east or southeast, kind of thinking about the way the sun's going to come up and hit that nest box first thing in the morning, and just avoiding placing it kind of due north so you don't get those heavy winds coming in and disrupting the nest box.
Thank you.
All right, well that was pretty exciting. Thank you for joining our session of Leopold Live. Again, we'd like to thank all those speakers and those that participated with our session. Look for upcoming sessions over the course of the next year, and our hope is to cover these very specific topics that are of interest to landowners and natural resource managers.
That's right. And I'd like to thank once again the Natural Resources Institute for coming out here and helping us provide this valuable information. At Bamberger Ranch Preserve, we hope to have our programming, including our workshops and tours, back up and running by the fall, depending on how things go. So make sure to watch for both the Texas A&M Natural Resources Institute and Bamberger Ranch Preserve on your social media channels, and make sure to check in every once in a while and see what we're up to.